Do you sometimes think that AI has the memory of a goldfish? Every conversation starts from nothing and it forgets everything the moment you close the tab. You end up having to re-explain yourself in the background of what you're doing over and over again. Well, there's a fix for that, and it's called the second brain. Now, the idea of a second brain kicked off properly early this year in around April when a guy called Andre Carpathy posted an idea of what he called the LLM Wiki. Now, Carpathy's worth listening to if you weren't already aware of him. He was one of the founding members of OpenAI, and he ran AI at Tesla, and these days he's building his own AI educational company. And his idea was almost embarrassingly simple. If you have a folder, drop things into it, and let AI read the lot, and then write itself a wiki out of it. And then every time you talk to the AI, it's got that wiki to hand. So AI isn't starting from scratch every single time. It knows things, or in AI speak, it has context. Now, this idea went around the AI world in a matter of days, and thousands of people have built their own version of it since. But the interesting thing is about who these people are. They're not AI nerds like me, but they're founders, marketing leads, people running real companies who just wanted to make their AI smarter every single day. Super simple concept, one folder and an AI whose job it is to keep it current. Now, second brains aren't new. Even before AI, we had things like wikis, notions, used Evernote, even written with paper diaries, folders full of notes, apps, tags, backlinks, etc., etc. And I bet most of them are still sitting there untouched, because I know mine certainly are, because the idea was never the problem. Maintaining it was the problem. Because it's always admin, and no one likes admin. In the 1980s, a guy called Ray Dalio started writing about every single significant decision he'd made and the reasoning behind it. Now, Dalio runs Bridgewater, which is one of the world's biggest investment funds. And over the years, that became something he called his principles. It wasn't a book at first, although it has turned into a very successful book. But it was a working system. Now, new people coming into the firm could read how Ray actually thought, and facing a decision, you could look up his reasoning on something similar. Now, the idea was always sound, but it was the upkeep that was very challenging for most people. And that's what's changed now, because the AI does all of the maintenance and upkeep now. It reads new stuff coming in, it figures out what matters, it files it, it links it, and it's the admin job that killed every single brain that's ever started until now. At the same time as all this, context windows got big enough to hold real amounts of material, and the models got good enough to reason across all of it. And then tools like Claude Code turned up where you can point it to a folder on your machine and it will actually work on it rather than just talking about it. The next bit is the thing I'd like you to take away, because I think it's where most of the online advice goes wrong. Nearly everything you read about the second brain is about where to store it. Should you put it on Obsidian, Notion, Google Docs, Dropbox, Git? But to me, that's not the important question. If all you want is a searchable pile of documents, you don't need any of this. You can go onto Claude or ChatGPT, create a project, upload your files, ask it questions, and that genuinely works, and it takes about 10 minutes. In its simplest form, it is a second brain because it's building additional context. But where a proper second brain is different is that it picks up what you learn as you go. It joins things up that you would have never thought are connected because you're not holding all the information in your head at once. It will spot when you've said two contradictory things 3 months apart, and it can tell you where a decision came from, which is a question I basically ask myself constantly, but never have the answer to. A searchable pile of notes will go stale, whereas a second brain will keep up with you as you go along. So here's a quick demonstration of how I've got mine set up. Now, in its simplest form, this is just a bunch of files and a bunch of folders. Now, there are loads of different tools you can use to store these, but effectively these are running on your device locally. Now, behind the scenes, I have something called Git to manage the version control of these, which basically means that if anything gets changed or overwritten, I can always go back and retrieve an older version. It also manages shared files across my team, so if something gets updated by somebody else, I can get the latest version and it will manage any conflicts between the files. But as you can see, within each folder, the files are .md files, which stands for Markdown. And this is a simple format that AI can read easily. There's no complicated app, no database, it's just simple text files. And with all that context, I can then point any LLM at one of those folders or a bunch of folders, and it will have the context that it needs to answer the question. For example, I had a meeting the other day and I used Granola to take notes for me. I can then ask the second brain to give me the follow-up actions from that meeting because it already has the context for it. Okay, so that's how I've got mine set up, but let me talk you through a couple of different ways how you can store your second brain. Now, there are two different approaches an AI can get to your documents. If they're in a folder on your computer, it can just open them directly on your machine. But if they're somewhere like Notion and they're not on your machine, so that it basically has to go through a connector, which is basically a middleman or an API where they have to go and get the files. It works, but it's just a bit slower and it costs a little bit more. Now, files on your computer are quicker to access and they use less resource to get them, and files in the cloud are easier to share in most cases. And that's the trade-off with all of the 4 options that I'm going to explain today. So option 1, a basic project. If you take a handful of documents and describe the business and bundle them into a project, whether that's on ChatGPT or on Claude, or whatever AI you use, you can then name the project after your business or whatever the context of everything it is, add the files, and then you're done. Now, the good thing about this is it's by far the fastest route to create a second brain. You don't have anything to install, and if you're on a team plan, you can share the project across your team members. Now, the not so good thing about this is that there are limitations about what you can do. It's quick and dirty, and it does the job, but if you're using this seriously, you'll soon run into blockers. Now, option 2, using a folder in Dropbox or a Google Drive. Now, instead of documents living inside of an AI tool, they live on a folder, either on your machine that syncs with Dropbox or Google Drive. Now, when something gets updated, it's just like updating it manually. It will get synced, and if it's shared with anyone else, it will also get synced along with their machines. Now, the nice thing about this is if you don't need to install any new tooling. If you're using Dropbox or Google Drive already, then you've already got it, and it will sync for free, and it's pretty quick. Now, the downside of this is it can run into conflict issues. For example, if two people are working on the same folder or file at the same time, then it can take a little bit of untangling. This is a really good starting point if you want to get going and creating a shared brain amongst your team. Option number 3, Notion, or whatever you already use. If everything you've already got is in Notion, then moving it out to build something like this is a bit mad. So build the same structure as Pages and write a small skill that tells the AI where everything lives, since there's no file on your computer to do that job. And that means there's nothing to migrate, and Notion looks pretty nice, which matters to people more than you'd admit, because you'll keep it tidy, and something that's easy to maintain and looks good is great. And then also the other thing is that permissions are already built in. So if you're sharing something and you want more advanced permissions about what people can read and write, then this is the way to go. But the downside of this method is that it is a middle layer, which can be slower and more expensive. Now, option 4, a folder using something like Git. Now, this is something that I use. It's basically a folder of text files, but it keeps of every version of itself using something called Git. Now, there are other versions of source control, such as Subversion, but Git is the most popular one out there. And if you've ever done any kind of web development, you've probably heard of it. All it is a version control system which will keep track of any files within it, and it will give you the history of who changed what, the details of every single change that has been made and when it was changed. And you can also add a remote version of this, which is called a remote repo, and then store it on something like GitHub, which can then be shared across the team. So it's like the best of both worlds. Now, the best thing about Git is that it's robust and it's free, but the downside is there's a little bit more technical than the other options, but personally it is my favorite way of doing things, but that is because I come from a development background. So there are the 4 options on how you can get a second brain set up, and it really depends on what your use case is. If it's just you and you want it working today, then try projects within an AI tool. Do you have a small team, but not especially technical? You could look at something like Dropbox or Drive. If you've got a team and you need permissions and everything built in, and you're already using something like Notion, then you can use Notion. But if you want a robust and a slightly longer term solution, and you can handle a little bit more of a technical setup at the beginning, then I recommend you look at something like Git. And these aren't one-way doors. Mine started a lot closer to option 2, where I was using a Dropbox solution before I moved to a Git one. Now, everything I've shown you so far, you still need to update manually. Now, if you're anything like me, the setup is the exciting bit. But where it really adds value is where you can automate the ingestion side of things, so it will actually feed itself data and then it will grow from there. So what you want to do is think about your real life. Where does the information come from in a raw format? Now, for me, I have things like email, I use transcription tools such as Granola and Fireflies, I have my calendar, I use WhatsApp, I have a CRM, I also have things like Google Ads account, Google Manager, Google Reviews, Google Analytics, and finally Stripe. Each day I have a script that Claude built for me that will go through each of these, ingest the data for that day's work. It will go and look at my emails for the day, the emails are received, emails are sent, and it will look at my WhatsApp, it will look at the Stripe data for the day, see what our revenue was, and it figures out what the important parts of all of that is, and store a summary of this within my second brain, with context that I can refer to later on. It will also cross-reference this against any current decision making, and it will enable me to have the information that I need to make decisions that are needed to be made. Now, this is the bit that's personal to you and you will need to build out, but the best thing to do is that Claude or ChatGPT will help you do it. One thing worth saying here though, all of this sits on my own machine, so it's just me and nobody else is seeing it. But the moment you share your brain with a team, whether it's Dropbox folder or Notion or a shared repo, everything in that is readable by everyone you've shared it with, unless you've set certain permissions in a special way. So it's worth deciding early on what goes into a shared brain or what goes in your personal one. Now, once you've done all that, it has the context, and you can just use AI as you normally do. But the thing is, it has that layer on top of the training data that it already has, where it has this context about you and what you're working on. Now, a real life example where I do this currently is that my Google Ads is currently connected to my wife's business, which is an interior design business. And I've been helping her how to get more business online. Now, every week, my second brain goes through and pulls the Google Ads data and will analyze the results of her marketing spend and provide recommendations that I can report back to her. And it works really well, and it effectively means it gets updated and I get a weekly report, and the whole second brain has a context for this. Before I go, I just want to talk about something called Obsidian. Now, I mentioned it earlier, and pretty much every video that's out there that's already talking about the second brain talks about Obsidian. If you've not already come across it, it is pretty cool, but in my opinion, for first-time users, it can be a little bit overwhelming. I think there are better ways of getting into building a second brain. The nice thing is that everything we're doing is portable. So if you did want to go down the Obsidian route later on, then you can. I occasionally go back and try it. It's as easy as going and downloading it and clicking on a folder to open it as your second brain, and you've got it. You can browse the files that you've already got in your second brain. So after all of this, you might be thinking, what's the point of doing all of this? And the main answer is because it compounds. Every time you use it and build a second brain, it knows more about you. The more it knows, the better it answers, and so the more you use it. Most people I know open Claude or ChatGPT and start from nothing every single time. The same brilliant model underlying underneath, but it has a blank stare, it has no context, and you have to end up re-explaining yourself, start time and time again from scratch. But with the second brain, it has all the context it needs. And it's a bit like a new employee starting on day one at your business. They won't know much, but give them 6 months, a year, 2 years, and they will start to know how you work and add more and more value. Now, before I wrap up, I just want to make 2 final points. Firstly, the second brain is only as good as the information you give it. If it has rubbish data sources, then it really can't have anything to go on. So it's worth investing the time in getting it set up properly and being able to ingest as much data as possible. And then secondly, when it comes about choosing which method to do this, just think about your current use case and go with something you can get started with. If you need to share it wider with a team or need to refine it the way you're doing it, then don't stress, because the files are in a very common format and very portable, so they're not tied to one route that you're going down. Thank you for watching this, and if you haven't already, please subscribe, and I'll be doing lots more videos soon, and I'll see you for the next one.